Hey guys, it's your boy Kenny Boulder here. We're going to start this video on the ground so I can be level with you right now, because this is something that's really important to me. Warhammer 40k and this franchise has been something that's been near and dear to me since I was a kid. I've been reading Warhammer 40k books, been part of the community, been part of this amazing universe since 7th grade when I first picked up my first 40k book at a Borders bookstore. And so right behind me literally is my entire collection of Warhammer 40k books. You can see right here, this black shelf is full of Warhammer 40k books. Horus Heresy, Siege of Terra, everything that I've read is on this shelf right here. And it's all Warhammer 40k books. Right next to me though, this white shelf right here, guys, is books that I've not read yet. And I have a pretty big collection right here. I have at least like 1, 2, another row behind this, 3 rows of books I've not even read yet. And then all these books here, well, besides this book right here, this is Stardust Thief. This is literally the only non-Warhammer 40k book right here. So, you know, I've read, these are the books I'm going to read. These are the books I'm going to care about and look at and eventually go through. And, you know, you have everything here from Primarch books, Orc books, Iron Warriors, Chaos Space Marines. Anyway, the point I'm trying to make here is that all these books here, I'm going to read soon. And I just want to say that this is something that's near and dear to me. So right here, just to go over about all these books here, these are all the other books that, you know, that I've just gathered over the years. It's taken me almost 20 years to gather all these books here so that you can see and read, and for me to read. And again, I just have, like, it's not organized at all, but basically, these books all cover everything from Space Marines, Chaos Space Marines, and especially for today's topic, the Custodes. The Adeptus Custodes are literally the Emperor's champions. And right on top here, obviously Siege of Terra, they're going to be predominantly in these books here, in the Siege of Terra books. So you have all these Siege of Terra books right here. And I have luckily gotten one of the coveted books of all time, Volume 3 of The Death in the End, where literally Constantine Valdor, he's the Legion commander of the Custodes. And he basically kind of has this revelation that his role in the universe, the role of, you know, Adeptus Astartes, is not the best for mankind. And we kind of see this here in other books that kind of may or may not feature him. So other books with the Custodes, and I can just go over right now. We have literally his book himself. Let me get these books out of the way. The Man of the Hour, Constantine Valdor's book. This is Horus Heresy's hardcover book, Constantine Valdor, Birth of the Imperium. This book is incredible. I love this book because it actually talks about the end of the Unification Wars, which is Warhammer 30k, when the Emperor of Mankind takes over Terra with his Thunder Warriors, and where Constantine Valdor and his Custodians have a really big role in the Imperium. Because they're making the Space Marine project in this book, and then they have kind of like a mini Civil War. Other books with other, you know, Custodians, there's a lot here, guys. There's the Regent's Shadow, which is one of, again, it's kind of funny because Chris Wright is like the Custodian guy. He writes all the Custodian books for some reasons. So we have the Regent, Watchers of the Throne, the Regent's Shadow. That's a fun book right here about the beginning of the crisis, the new Dark Millennium with, you know, Abaddon's 13th Crusade, and when the Eye of Terra, or the Eye of, you know, Terror actually takes over much of the universe and cuts, you know, the whole universe in half. You got more Emperor's Legion stuff right here, and these are the other hardcover books I got. Oh, Elizabeth Pennant books here. You know, Elizabeth Baquin books. These may or may not have Custodians in them. That's kind of a bit of a spoiler, but shh, you didn't hear that from me. You got Emperor's Legion right here. Another Chris Wright book. Again, more Custodian books here. And then you have all these other books with the War of the Beast novels right here in the back. And just to give you an idea, you know, the Custodians also have a feature in that book as well. And they're not very pleased and happy with the High Lords of Terra. And then, of course, all of the Horus Heresy books here. I mean, the Custodians, a lot of them actually come in here with the, you know, one of my favorite books of the Horus Heresy is going to be The Master of Mankind. Again, this is by Aaron Dembski Bowden. And the Horus Heresy really introduces a lot of the Custodians' lore, just because this is like their moment of triumph and their moment of failure. At this part of the galaxy, the Imperium of Mankind has basically taken over the world, not the world, the whole universe really, and they basically have expanded the Imperium's borders until the Horus Heresy occurs, which is the civil war of the Imperium. And this is basically the Custodians' biggest failure, because in the Siege of Terra and the Horus Heresy, the Custodians fail to protect their iconic leader, the Emperor of Mankind. And I look at this book here, The Master of Mankind, as a way to talk about, you know, the Emperor, the 10,000's biggest moment here, which is basically the war in the webway, when the Emperor of Mankind is holding the borders of chaos at bay, and he basically has to rely on his Custodes to fight against demonic legions invading the webway, the human webway that the Emperor of Mankind was trying to create and build to, you know, give more access into the universe without using the warp. And these stories about the Custodians' failures, triumphs, and their ability to fight against these demonic hordes reflects on why I love this cast, this faction. So Aaron Dubinsky Bowden, he actually wanted to introduce female Custodes in this book originally, and he got a message from Games Workshop saying that the molds weren't ready because the Custodes were actually being played out and released in Games Workshop, and literally he got told during this process that he can't introduce female Custodians because of the molds that were being made. So the corporos were basically like, hey man, I know you want to introduce some female Custodes, but not right now. Now is not in the right time. Just make them all gender, you know, like make the same characters that you introduced before. Talk about them there, and we'll go from there. So this is one of my favorite books, and it has Sisters of Silence, Custodians, Adeptus Mechanicus, you name it. Great book. Obviously, love Aaron. And again, there's like so much Horus Heresy books here. There's like, I think 50 plus novels in this area alone. First Heretic, again, another Aaron Dubinsky novel, has Custodians. Custodians are literally on the cover of this book right here, being attacked by possessed Chaos Space Marines from the Word Bearers Legion. And yeah, I mean, I love these novels. These novels are, I've read every single one of them, and they're magical to me. They're part of the universe, what I love about this universe. And obviously, some of these novels are not even 10 years old. The Siege of Terra novels ended literally this year, in 2024. And I just want to highlight that the universe of Warhammer 40k is literally always expanding. And some of these novels are like, you know, the lore has been out there for almost 40 years now. And I'll talk about more about this in a second in my, you know, further in the video. But we're going to talk about the lore. We're going to talk about the backlash / feedback of female Custodians. And honestly, we're going to talk about some of the really misogynistic parts of this community that we have that's coming out of the woodworks and the controversy of Warhammer 40k. All this behind me here is all the established lore. And when we include more female representation, more stories about female Custodes, I can only see the brighter and honestly the more grimdark future of Warhammer 40k. Because incorporating more of these stories, talking about more representation, can bring us all together with the joys and the unfortunate tragedies and the grim darkness of Warhammer 40k. Okay, so now we're going to go over what is Custodians. Because I feel like a lot of folks have been kind of confused on what the lore and what the Adeptus Custodes have been. And so I just want to go over the details of this. So real quick, the Adeptus Custodes, and I'm just going to show the screen right quick. They are also known as Legal Custodes, Adeptus Custodes. That's like their official title, but they're commonly known as the Custodians. The Custodians are basically the bodyguards of the God Emperor Mankind, and they've always been the bodyguard of the Emperor. So I just want to go over, they're the companions of the Emperor. They've helped retake Terra during the reunification wars in 30k. They're the advisors, scholars, philosophers. They're not meant to be mass-produced like the Thunder Warriors or Space Marines. And just to give you an idea of them, there's only 10,000 of them. In a massive universe like this seems like a big number, but 10,000 bodyguard soldiers, they're the best of the best. And they're considered like the superior version of Space Marines, but not obviously inferior. They are inferior of the Primarchs. But I just want to highlight that Constant Valdor, the original first Captain General of the Custodians, he literally could go 1-on-1 versus 1 against the Primarchs. That's how powerful and how interesting they are. They're literally characters that can go at 1-on-1 versus 1 against, Primarchs, at least named ones anyway, and other ones can go 1 versus 3, 1 versus 4 against, Space Marines. And so, I just want to highlight that. And, obviously, the early lore. The lore's changed from the Custodians. The original lore of the Custodians were basically these guys. Shirtless guys with spheres. And I will say this, the lore has changed so much over the past 40 years of Warhammer 40k, as authors added golden armor, bolters to their spheres, stuff like that. All we knew originally was that they're just, they were characters that defended the Emperor. That's all we knew. And things have changed so much since then. And I just want to, again, highlight this. This is old Warhammer 40k Rogue Trader miniatures. The Custodian literally was a guy with a spear, wearing, with a six-pack, whatever, and a cloak and a helmet. The helmet, the spear, and the cloaks, they've been around, they've been maintained, and I guess the controversy now is that, and I hate to say this, is now they are women. They're women Custodians. And I want to emphasize this. Including women Custodians does not break the lore of Warhammer 40k. All the Primarchs, all the named Custodians are still the same. They're not gender-bending current or established lore. They're literally just saying that women can be Custodians. And I just want to highlight this to you real quick, guys, because I've shown this picture many, many times now. And this is what a male and a female Custodians would look like. This is a male. This is a female Custodians. Because at the end of the day, a Custodian is literally like a customized vehicle. It is an individual who's gone through many, many, many steps with the dark age of technology, of turning them into a Custodian. To become a Custodian is to become transhuman, to be something that isn't human anymore. You literally are not human if you become a Custodian, because you're 10 feet tall, you wear golden armor, and you carry a spear that shoots RPGs. So, the idea and the concept of, we cannot genetically modify humans, both men and women, 30,000 years in the future, is pretty ridiculous to me. Because at the end of the day, you definitely can. And it is not immersion breaking. Because we've seen this before. People can genetically modify themselves into become super soldiers, and genetically modify themselves to be something else entirely. So there's another meme I have here, and it also relates to this whole controversy as well. This is the Gimli meme. Gimli says, "It is true you don't see many Custodians women. And in fact, there are so many alike in voice and appearance that they often mistaken for Custodians men. And this appearance has given their rise to believe that there are no Custodians women, and that the Custodians were just made by the Emperor." I feel like this kind of hits the mark, is that they're literally the same. They're one for one. And I can obviously talk about female Space Marines. That's obviously a huge controversy in its own right. It is a MacGuffin how you have to have a gene seed to basically become a Space Marine. And I can get on that right now, but I won't. Because we're focusing on one faction, which is Custodes. Imperial bodyguards to the God Emperor. That's the only thing we're talking about. And I feel like we need to make that very clear in this video, just because there's a lot of controversy. There's a lot of folks saying no, 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 no. But there's not that much supporting evidence against that. There's nothing that says that you cannot genetically modify a woman becoming a Custodes. It's just, that isn't there. That isn't in the lore. And that's why we're having this huge debate, huge controversy, because it's a lot of confusion. And I feel like I've seen a lot of confusion with Space Marines and Custodians. And again, I'm not going to bite in that apple of female Space Marines yet. But I do want to emphasize that females can become Custodians. Because there's nothing that says they can't be. Again, it's a specialized, genetically modified procedure and training to become a Custodian that only Custodians know, apparently. So what makes you think that Custodians wouldn't do that on women? And that's the thing I want to emphasize, is that the lore makes sense. That doesn't break the lore, and we're gonna keep going on this topic right now.
And so, pretty obvious that Games Workshop just retconned this, probably for a, like political reason, like, oh, there's men and women that are part of this. I think that if they had said, yeah, this wasn't the case originally, but now we're going to add them in because of, like, we just feel like women should be included in this, I think that people, they would take it a lot better than this. Because I think what people really don't like about a post like this is the fact that it's an insult to the intelligence of the people that are buying the products. And you have to keep in mind that people that play Warhammer are really smart because...
And today's not a great video. Well, great video as always. I'm great at those. But not great news, unfortunately. I regret to inform everybody that female custodies have been confirmed.
Hello everyone. So before you say, oh, BasedIfTrue, you just hate women. First of all, tell that to my fiance of 3 years.
Now, I'm not going to lie to you. I am not a master of Warhammer 40k lore.
What I'm saying is the future of 40k has fallen. I'm not looking forward to any more future books or novels. No future editions or codexes. 10th edition will probably be my last newer edition.
There have always been female custodies. This is some real 1984 level shit right here.
Literally 1984. No, but I mean, it's just one lore thing, and this is the controversy the whole time. And I just think that every YouTuber on the internet that has a platform or has some interest in science fiction and Warhammer 40k is basically decided to make a video about this. And I think it is definitely getting clicks. I mean, I'm making this video, for example, and it's getting clicks. And so I just want to emphasize that, this issue is one named character in a faction that is massive. 10,000 Custodes. 10,000 named characters that could be anyone. And just because there's one female. And I feel like this is an issue that is more than just, one female character. It is the encroachment of putting more diversity, putting more representation into Warhammer 40k. And I just want to indicate like that. Literally the lore tip that everyone is losing their mind. It's one sentence. And I feel like it's just funny because everyone keeps quoting this, but literally the quote was, Custodian Calidus Tovelia Cash stood in the bridge of a Cobra-class destroyer. And that's literally it. She is named one time in one section of the new codex, and this is what people are losing their minds over. A single paragraph that I got leaked before the codex dropped, and people are losing their minds over one female custodian. So I just want to give you, this isn't 1984. This isn't the government telling us that this is, it just isn't. And I just think it's kind of funny because in this short story that's introduced, I read clips of it. Basically, she is glassing and preparing to orbital bombard parts of Holy Terra, the capital of the Imperium, during a blood game. And a blood game is basically it's like a way for the custodians to harness and finance their skills as the Emperor's guardians by having various. And this was actually introduced recently in 2007 or 9 during the Horus Heresy book series. So this is also recent lore-ish, recent. And these blood games, these lore changes, they only improve, they only enhance, and it's not 1984. And I just emphasize that.
Successful in it. Why prior to this has there not been a single named character in all of the books if this is the case? It's so true. You would think that they would have established this years and years ago if this was truly what they wanted, and so these changes just come across as extremely hollow.
Potent in combat than the Adeptus Astartes. So the claim that Warhammer is making is that there have been females all along. They're trying to change retcon. They're lying, basically, and I can prove this. Grums has proved this, which we'll go over in just a second. And that theory can be disproven right here, right on this page, because if you scroll down just a little bit, it says the Adeptus Custodes are a force of individual warriors, each a bastion in his own rights. To find very shocking. Check this out. The next appearance of the Custodes in their trademark gold armor appeared in the Horus Heresy trading card game in 2003. He searched every Custodes card and found 0 female artwork. So he has pictures showing that there are no females in the Adeptus Custodes. And yeah, there you go. There's those pictures. In the 7th and 8th edition of the official Custodes codexes, they are repeatedly referred to as the Brotherhood of Demigods recruited from the sons of nobles. So it says right there, it is known that all custodians begin their lives as the infant sons of the noble houses of Terra. Yeah, kind of hard to just insert females into this, especially when this is a very solidly established thing since the 80s, apparently. I mean,
A when, not an if. Because of course, that's true. This is the ideological capture of the franchise happening here in real time. We know the Custodes are male. And even if it wasn't stated outright, which again, it has been, it would be weird, very weird indeed, for the Custodes to just be like, oh yes, no, we've kept this a secret all this time. I know you've never heard about a male Custodes ever before, not a single mention in the Horus Heresy or any preceding source books, but now we could totally do this. We've just elected to never, ever, ever at any point told you, and now there are 2 of them.
They could be testing and processing thousands of children born of noble families every year, and still they are producing only one single custodian every year. Female custodians existing without the end of the Emperor simply doesn't make sense. The people left behind after his entombment simply do not understand the process. It has a 50 times higher death rate than it had under the end of the Emperor. So I have to ask, looking at this screenshot for this female custodian mentioned, who the fuck made them? They weren't in the Heresy or Great Crusade, we never saw one until this dropped, and I am assuming these are in the 42nd millennium. If they can't adapt the process to lower the odds of death, how can they adapt it to work on women that have major differences in biology and genetics than males? The Emperor did not make them, he's on the throne, so whom?
Related to the story, they don't even bother. They just say, well, there were always female Custodes, even though that contradicts their own lore. They're basically saying, like, there is no reason for you to get invested into our lore. Like, there is absolutely no reason why you should care, because we can change it whenever we want, you know? Imagine if your mother was telling you a fairy tale when you were a kid, and it's like, the king had a daughter, and then she's like, so the son of the king, and you're like, wait, didn't you say that the king have a daughter? Well, it's a fairy tale, why does it matter? It can be either or, you know?
I really like the Pontus, even though his takes are really bad. And, you know, this argument, this discussion of how Custodes, you know, introducing them now, it doesn't make any sense. It actually has been, like I said, introduced multiple times now, and would have been introduced sooner. So I feel like that a lot of these arguments of why now, why right now. I mean, again, you're incorporating and you're not really changing the current lore. No named characters or named custodians now have been gender bent into female characters. Constant Valdor is still a male character, so the argument that why now is kind of like, it just kind of doesn't really. It's a weak argument, and you know we have a lot of lore changes with custodians before. And in fact, I found this, again, this is my previous video, you can look it out right now. Basically, this is when Sanguinus meets the Emperor. Figures close around the craft's landing legs where the ship's great metal claws grip the radiation. Dust of the wasteland. These men and women were playing the same armor as the ship, running upon their bodies with painstaking artistry. So, like, they're basically custodians. I mean, they were mentioned before, and I mentioned this again multiple times, that you know, Aaron Dubinsky, when he wrote Master of Mankind, he literally was this close with just outright mentioning custodians being female. And a lot of readers like me, again, and for various times it's hinted that there's female custodians. There's just, now it's canon. Now it's outright publicly said. And I've always kind of had that idea that custodians have existed in with females being custodians since forever. And it's just kind of funny that a lot of complaints, a lot of arguments lately have been, why now? Why then? And the lore has changed. And again, I keep saying this. The lore has changed. The lore has changed. There's always been new additions to the lore, and the universe is expanding. There's hundreds of authors. And now these authors can now include female custodians. And they will be included. And I just think, again, it only is a good process part of the system. And it's just funny that, my Italian friend is arguing that custodian numbers don't make any sense. And I think there's 10,000. There's 10,000 of them. And this is a imperium made of quadrillions. Like, there are billions and billions of humans around the world. And Terra itself has, billions and billions of people. And, like, it's okay that a couple of them can be female.
Female custodians. It's the fact that they insulted their audience into telling them that they were always there. Yeah, oh, here we go. This is a good one. Imagine to gaslight an audience so autistic, they count the number of rivets on power armor to determine its sub-pattern, and who have such a long memory, they point out inconsistencies between books that were printed decades apart. And you think you're going to pull the wool over their eyes, and you're going to be like, oh, you didn't see it, you didn't see it.
Is what it is, a retcon, is fucking retarded. So, in your own canon, you call the Custodes a brotherhood. And then later on, you decide to make a tweet saying that there have always been women in this brotherhood.
Official Warhammer Twitter account simply replied, "Since the first of the 10,000 were created, there have always been female custodians." I see.
3, really. I do not consider canon. I will not be making videos in regards to it as if it was. I will not be talking about 40k in regards to anything canon after this point.
The members of which are privileged in being permitted to serve upon the Emperor, attending to his needs, receiving and recording his directions. These men never leave Earth and only rarely leave the Imperial Palace, an endless black hive of forbidden technology and subterranean passages delving deep within the bowels of the planet. So from this one lore excerpt, we can see that the Custodes are definitely stated to be male only when they are chosen to become Custodes.
Weird indeed for the Custodes to just be like, oh, yes, no, we've kept this a secret all this time. And I know you've never heard about a male Custodes, female Custodes ever before. Not a single mention in the Horus Heresy or any preceding source books. But now we could totally do this. We've just selected to never ever at any point tell you.
87 to the 8th edition Codex Adeptus Custodes published in 2018. This user is harnessing Game Workshop's own text against their word as proof that they're lying.
Changes that they didn't really announce or make a big deal out of or highlight for fans, they decided to also lie on social media. People are calling them out. Why do you make female Custodes? Since the first 10,000 were created, there have always been female custodians, but the lie detector has determined that that is a lie, and with just a few minutes of research, even if you're not a big Warhammer fan, you can figure out that that is not true, and that they are straight up lying, basically thinking that their fans, that the audience that they have, are filled with idiots. It is so disrespectful. And it's not like we're talking about a franchise that has no women that are part of it, because that is most certainly not the case. Right off the top of my head, I instantly think of the Sisterhood, whose military arm is known as the Sisters of Battle, and formerly the Daughters of the Emperor. Their focus is to root out the spiritual corruption and heresy within humanity and every organization of the Adeptus Terra. So it is perfectly fine to have, military arms within a franchise that are male-dominated and also female-dominated. That is not a problem, and it should not be a problem. But now, of course, we have a company changing around their lore and saying, oh no, it's been this way since the beginning, even though that's just not the case.
Give us information. Tell us this. It's a retcon, it's a retcon, it's a retcon. It is a retcon. Every sci-fi, every fantasy series have retcons all the time. In fact, we've seen many retcons before in Warhammer 40k, and nothing is written in stone. I feel like a lot of folks who are complaining about this don't really understand that Warhammer 40k has evolved and grown, and that because it's a woman, that's why they're like drawing this very frustration, despising, hate. I mean, there's a lot of feelings here, and I think it's kind of silly because end of the day, the retcons have been happening forever. We have had canon change over time, and obviously Warhammer and Warhammer 40k canons change multiple variations. Necrons originally were basically mindless robot automatons that just killed anything that's living, and now they have a new flair. They're now like space Egyptians. They are basically different dynasties, different leaders, different characters have personalities. They're not just robots that kill people. And, you know, the War of the Beasts, a lot of things were changed in the War of the Beasts. And the Death Watch, how Death Watch was founded and made. And I guess another example that kind of relates to this is Stormcast Eternals. Originally, we didn't really know about Stormcast Eternals, and this is Age of Sigmar, obviously, but they got retconned by including women. Women became Stormcast Eternals, or known as Sigmar Marines, because they look like Space Marines, but in Age of Sigmar. So what I'm trying to say here is canon, retcons, it's going to happen. It's always constantly happening. There's hundreds of authors here. There's some even contradictory lore questions. And I guess what people are upset about is that the fact they announced this. And just because it's an announcement doesn't mean that it is lore breaking. Having women custodes is not lore breaking. It doesn't break the lore. It's not really a retcon that like changes the lore, the plot. It doesn't do the gravity of the situation is not the same as all these YouTubers, influencers, and people are complaining about. It'd be different if they changed like the Emperor's gender. It'd be different if they changed Primarchs, if they're loyalists or, you know, traitor. That's a bigger retcon than what folks are describing here. And I guess this is going to be going towards our next section, which is unfortunate, and here we go.
This is a truly black-pilled moment for me, personally. I don't know about you guys.
So you know what this reminds me of? The Boy Scouts of America. This legitimately just reminds me of when they started allowing girls into the Boy Scouts. And to be honest, I don't really care if they found some intelligent and narrative-driven way to include women in the Custodes. It's fucking fantasy, you could probably do it. Or better yet, make some badass equivalent to the Custodes for women that have their own unique role. But instead, they just said, they were always Custodes, what are you, sexist?
Most of them who are sexist and racist and absolutely hate and despise their customers, going around and going like, oh my god, these white men, white men everywhere, I just can't stand it. And that's fine, you know, if you want to think like that. White men seem to be strong enough to take these insults.
Types. Oh, absolutely. That's the part that black pills me most is... This is just a step one to female Space Marines. Like, there's their biggest goal for the longest time has been female Space Marines, and they haven't been able to get it thus far. But now that they've been successfully able to manipulate them into femme custodes, it's a matter of time. Like,
now, I include that last part of my own, but I feel like this was truly just a test on their part to see what they can get away with in the future. Because when corporations do this to their lore to try to appease the masses, let's be honest, it almost always fucking fails. Do you honestly think that Games Workshop were trying to be sincere and respect their lore when their explanation for this announcement was it was always this way, when it just wasn't? This is honestly more retarded and lazy than it is woke.
I'm speechless. And honestly, it's pretty disgusting that these guys are claiming to be members in the community. And I feel like that it's hard for me to really give them like feedback or respond because it's toxic. It's just really, really bad takes. And from a fan, from a man, from a person of color, I just feel like these influencers, they don't understand the concept of like common courtesy and decency, and obviously they see this as a gateway to wokeism, and this is where this video is gonna kind of going towards the toxicity, the misogyny side of things, and I'll have some more opinions in a second here, and yeah, just enjoy these clips. They speak for themselves.
As make no mistake, there are no female custodians. There never have been any female custodians, and the lore itself points out that there are only male custodians. But more importantly, how did it come to this? How did an inherently right-wing setting like 40k declare that not only is its lore null and void, but that it never even existed in the first place? Well, that's where our new favorite phrase comes into play. Everything is political. It is a common phrase amongst the more extreme elements of the left, and stems from the similarly sounding and equally malicious phrase, the personal is political.
It's like, why is this happening? Like why are so many people that are showing very expensive collections of Game Workshop, why are they saying like, okay, enough, I will just choose another hobby, I will go and support diversity and buy stuff from the Japanese people?
And it sucks. It does, because now we know that GW is and has fallen to the political activists. They finally cracked. It took them a long time, and honestly, we were hoping for a while there for them not to do it, but just like the situation with Primaris replacing Firstborn,
so that, quote, everyone can find representation and heroes they relate to. Which is an odd thing to write, because the fun part of the grimdark universe of Warhammer is that one explicitly does not find oneself represented by the enormous genetically modified space racists whose sole mission is to exterminate all alien and divergent mutant life in the galaxy. Imagine the kind of person that must feel represented by the core faction of this universe. Many of the factions are not even human. One might ask if Games Workshop even understands why people play Tyranids or demons or orcs. The fun of the setting does not come in seeing oneself in the factions.
Band like Luton. And so when people are hearing this news, where they're just going in and changing this rich lore history with just insertions of DEI pushes, it's made people very unhappy. A lot of their fans and customers are expressing their disdain at this post that they made, and we're going to read a little bit about the Adeptus Custodes so that you guys can understand what they're retconning. The Adeptus Custodes, known as the Legion,
look at that and believe it to be a good financial decision. And the fact they confirm that they will go out of their way to diversify their characters and deliberately push for representation is all kinds of heresy in the eyes of 40k. This is peak financial self-deletion on Games Workshop part. How did they not see this? This is the same nonsensical approach that Marvel, DC, Star Wars, and more have taken for years now, and these properties have been beaten into the dirt when it comes to the financial ruin that's been left in its wake. Marvel's comics, for example, have been losing money for decades now due to this push for more inclusivity and representation. The movies, of course, for the first 10 years anyway, they felt genuine and great because they didn't adhere to what the ideology was behind the comics at the time. But once they did embrace the same ideology and push like the comics did, that's when Marvel's win streak ended, and they've been drowning in the lake of mediocrity and diminishing returns since. Only war. No, I want to play this game and I don't want it to be about boring war and death stuff. What the... These people exist, man. This is a real person whose voting rights are equal to yours, by the way. They don't even play Warhammer to begin with, but they would be interested in it if they removed all the problematic aspects like boring war and death concepts from the franchise. What are we even doing here anymore? That's not even Warhammer then. Oh boy, I can't wait to enjoy Star Wars, but only if they get rid of the Rebels and Imperials. And remove the lightsabers, maybe then I'll enjoy it. That's what this sounds like. You like D&D? Well, I'll only play it if you remove the Dungeons and Dragons from it. These people are real, man. They aren't fake. I can't believe they have takes like this, but this kind of person is who Games Workshop wants to pander to. Someone who doesn't even buy their products to begin with.
Those are their words. And as a fan, as someone who really enjoys lore and the factions and the stories of Warhammer 40k, I feel like they missed the point. And the reason why is because a lot of these takes are just so bad. And I want to bring this quote up right now from one of the very famous original creators of Warhammer 40k, Nick Davis. So this is his quote: I worked for Games Workshop for a very specific part of its history. I started in the mail order trolls and worked my way up into the studio, finishing up my career with GW working on White Dwarf magazine, UK and then the US edition. During my time at the company, especially during my White Dwarf years, I had one mission. I wanted to share the joy the Warhammer 40k hobby gave to me, to uplift that mystic veil and show you who you, the average gamer like me, could participate no matter your skill level. In short, take some of the mystery out of what is dry brushing, lol. I like to think I mostly succeed in this mission, and I'm heartened when I hear from now vets in the hobby who cite me as a positive influence. This hobby, as I like to call it, is supposed to be fun, a uniting force between gamers to create friendships, and a social function, something to be enjoyed and share. We were never supposed to build silos of lore because the very ideas of Warhammer and Warhammer 40k universe was the history was so convoluted and fragmented there was no such thing as fact. Everything was supposed to contradict. That was the purpose. That said, I'm overjoyed seeing the hobby that once gave me a means to live, being so inclusive, seeing female, LGBTQ plus gamers, and seeing them represent the highest level of GW toy soldiers is pure joy. I love it. I wish I had seen more of it during my time at Games Workshop, but we are here now, and you made this old white dwarf gamer very proud. Play well. It's so infuriating that we have culture wars in this community. And it's so silly that any step, any progress, any form of representation is met with this toxic misogyny. This toxic misogyny that is engulfing the internet right now. And it's showing not just Warhammer 40k fans, but the world of of these guys. And these guys do not represent the community. They do not represent our community. They do not represent Warhammer 40k. And they don't represent the direction of what the fandom is going to go towards. The lore, the idea of the community of Warhammer 40k is inclusive. It is talking about things. And it's just being all together in the world of grim darkness and world of suck. Because no one in their right mind wants to live in 40k. No one wants to live and be a imperial citizen. Because you would get destroyed and killed immediately. Literally, there are giant monsters that they don't care about sex, creed, race. They're literally Tyranids. They will kill you just because you're a human, that you're alive. There are orcs who don't care of your sex. They're just there for a good fighting time. And for, you're a pinky humie. Anyway, I think what I'm trying to say here, and when I address a lot of these YouTubers and influencers, is they're coming from the right-wing media. They're coming from really toxic masculinity, and they're not really representative of what Warhammer 40k is all about. And there is no universal message from Warhammer 40k. I feel like a lot of it is satire, and a lot of times folks don't really recognize satire being satire. And at the end of the day, they just glorify the big macho men who are fighting against aliens and bugs and mutants. And that's not the point. The point is that technology has been lost, and that we live in a pseudo-fascist state at this time, where basically it doesn't matter who you are. You're basically, your life, your right of being isn't worth anything because you're in this bureaucratic fascist state. And I feel like, at the end of the day, it's these guys who don't really care about the lore. They don't care about the message. They don't care about any of this. They just care about the clickbait, the rage bait, the culture wars. And we're going to keep going to this because there's much, much more. And it's so sad.
Moral worth of an act, but instead calculates right and wrong through the lens of power. It is in the power to act that wokeness finds moral worth to lie, in the ability to privilege one and exclude the other. Exclusion implies a lack of power over a certain domain, which renders the excluded as being denied access to right and wrong, and the excluders themselves as immoral because it is access to power which is the very source of the substance of morality.
anyone out there, anyone whatsoever at all, that thought that 40k could not be subverted, because 40k as a setting is absolutely inherently right-wing. The Imperium in particular is an explicitly right-wing organization that holds all of the right-wing values whilst holding virtually none of the left-wing values. The Imperium does not value progress, it does not value fairness, it values tradition, it values honor, it values strength. These are the things that the Imperium value. It is an explicitly right-wing project, there is simply no question about it. But Games Workshop, however, is a British corporation in Nottingham, England. It is not an explicitly right-wing organisation. And what was that quaint saying? Any organisation that is not explicitly right-wing will eventually become left-wing? Now,
females that make males into better soldiers than females in reality or not reality. The main problem I have with female custodians existing is that they make no sense on a sustainability standpoint. Let me expose you the reality of attrition in war. Now, we know the process to make custodians is hard to survive. It was under the Emperor. It is 50 times harder now that he's on the throne, to the point that one custodian was created every year where he could make 50 per year.
Greater standard of morality transcends petty moral concerns such as lying, looting, or murder, and is why its advocates literally go to bat for people who do all of those things. It's not that they are bad people, they are the victims of a system which prevented them from the opportunity to be good people in the first place because they were excluded from it. In the case of Games Workshop, this quest for righteousness resolves itself into a common question which the philosophy of inclusion and representation always kicks up: whether it is acceptable to have single-sex spaces or not. Warhammer had always been a very male-dominated game, made for men, purchased by men, and so naturally it reflected that. This, however, is not inclusive. It is exclusive, and even though exclusivity is the root of excellence, the people in Games Workshop are recent converts to the cult of inclusivity.
And once every year. You need a very few males to rebuild a population from going extinct. Obviously, I'm not talking about just so few that you end up being blood-related with every child within 2 generations, but not an exorbitant amount. But you need every single woman available to keep children coming. If custodians, with this level of death just for the genetical process to evolve them, in which we can assume thousands of potential custodians die every year, started using females, how long until there is no more females of pure genetics and noble blood to birth them? How long until all that is left is the old nobles, not capable any longer of producing more aspirants? Ever thought of that to everyone that was advocating in having female custodians? Removing the
accuse, then you subvert, then you conquer, and finally, female custodies have always existed. And it always begins with defining the target as political, and thus a target for accusation and conquest. And it doesn't need to make sense either, of course. This is how we get Stephanie Sterling arguing that Dark Souls is actually about capitalist oppression of the working class.
Some of the worst toxic individuals on Earth. There are open letters in the comment section here. Open letters from minorities showing the abuse that they're getting from these white men that are social justice activists simply because they disagree. So you have like a black person or a black woman that's like, no, I like Warhammer the way it is, and they use slurs, they use harassment, they try to dox, they do rifle ruination simply because she disagrees. So you have an ideology by these people who believe themselves to be the champions of minorities, who believe themselves to be the champions of the oppressed. And when you have the alleged minorities or people that are oppressed saying, well, actually, you know, you're wrong, I don't agree with your ideology, they attack those people. So what that goes to say, is it actually about helping minorities and oppressed individuals? Or is it just like for the bourgeois white individuals to feel good about themselves? And they don't like it when someone that they champion, when they represent is coming up and saying, no, you actually don't represent me. They get rid of that person. They make absolutely sure they make that person feel unwelcome because, again, they're so arrogant in their ways that they believe they hold the ultimate truth. And it's this behavior that is incredibly toxic. I don't want to play with these people, and definitely I do not want to know that the company that I give money to is catering to these individuals.
I generally don't know how women deal with this. Being told no, being told what you can and can't do, being told reproduction ratios for custodies and male and female. Like, I don't get it. I don't. And, like, it's actually crazy that, you know, I've watched many of these videos, and these are just examples that are very cut and dry with their misogyny, and I just think it's crazy that these guys have insane followings, and that a lot of the upvotes and downvotes ratios are actually pretty high. So, like, most of the people who agree with these thoughts, they generally are pretty supportive and open about it. And you'll read comments throughout the whole section, people spewing the most really incel comments you can imagine, of just really right-wing cringe that is like, yeah, this is ruining the hobby, this is terrible, this is the worst thing of all time. And I am really struggling. Just really struggling with how people could be okay with this. And obviously, I get it. Warhammer 40k is not mainstream. It is, well, it's very popular in the internet. The internet, like, and obviously parts of the United Kingdom, the United States, like, there is a lot of 40k fans and people who out there, but it's just, I feel like it's drawn a lot of the wrong crowd for the wrong reasons, and it is kind of scary that these guys are active members of the community. And I feel like this is a problem. And this is something that should be addressed and to be called out. Like, I don't know about you guys, but I would not be okay with going to a tournament at a workshop and these guys having these opinions in front of me. I'd be like, hey, man, like, I'm not a woke, left-wing, progressive liberal here, but, like, if they would spout this political opinion, these voices, that is scary. And that is very... And if you're a woman, I can't even imagine. Like, I'm a guy. I have privilege. I could go to places without being, like, objectified. And I have a lot of privileges that women don't have. Because I'm a guy. I'm a man. If you're a woman trying to get in this hobby and you see this and you see this rhetoric, of course you'd be terrified. It's toxic. It's misogynist. It is scary. And I just don't, like, I am truly in disbelief. And I'm sorry. Like, ladies, women, I'm sorry. I apologize that you have to deal with this. And I know this is a small, very small fandom in the overworldly things. Like, there's so much more out there. And I just want to say, I'm going to have 40k fans, I'm sorry that you have to deal with this. This is unfair. This is so messed up that we're just making things like you know, I feel like making this video has definitely been eye-opening. And seeing the comments, seeing all of the Redditors, the YouTubers, the Twitters, it's sad. And, you know, I use Warhammer 40k, I use Black Library books as a way to escape reality, to go to a different place. And, you know, it's funny that everyone's complaining about, like, being a snowflake, being, like, I don't know how to describe it, guys. It really is kind of sad when something that you care about, the fandom, and then you meet other fans and they're just toxic assholes who have really, really bad takes and views. It makes me sad. And I just want our community to be inclusive and be honest with each other. And opening this whole can of worms of Custodes has opened another can of worms. And I know I didn't want to talk about female Space Marines, but as I've been editing, as I've been recording, I have to present the stuff that I've seen. And a lot of people, I mean, I'll show it. Here it is.
In a sense, this is a black-pilled video in regards to the future of 40k. Same way I am black-pilled on the future of Star Wars. That's not going to be redeemable. I consider this a huge step towards an irredeemable future for 40k. Because if they're willing to start ham-fisting female Custodes into the lore, how long till it's female Space Marines? I would put money down not long. So, I'm not telling anybody to quit the hobby. In fact, I encourage you guys not to. Keep being in the hobby. Keep being active members. Absolutely call this crap out and say how stupid it is.
To do this. However, still, the compulsion to drive their property to this place remains, and they cannot simply ignore it. They must somehow find a way of creating female Space Marines.
And I just wish Games Workshop would at least attempt to care about their product these days. But here they are exposing that they really just couldn't be fucked anymore. And you know what? Maybe next they'll say that all the Sisters of Battle are trans women, so there truly are no female Space Marines.
Who own Warhammer, lies about Custodes and Retconn's lore, gender flipping them in the new 10th edition codex for woke points, and possibly to prep for larger changes ahead, aka rumored female Space Marines, which is something that I've been hearing too.
I'm tired, boss. I'm tired. Female Space Marines! It's so crazy that the idea of a female Space Marine will work up all these dudes. And I got bad news for you. Female Space Marines already exist in Warhammer 40k. And I'm not talking about the Sisters of Battle. I'm talking about actual canon female Space Marines. There's actually many female Space Marine characters that have been name dropped over the years. Top of my head right now, there was basically a female Space Marine of the Dark Angels, because a lot of lore had various humans be augmented, genetically modified to become Space Marines, literally have Space Marine armor, use bolters, and one of them was a Dark Angels commander, and she was one of the Fallen. She actually worked with Luther, who's also another Chaos Space Marine / Space Marine for the Dark Angels. And, you know, I guess this is where we kind of go through multiple lens and various jumbling jumps, but there's also some Chaos Space Marines that have been introduced before. There was a Imperial Guards woman who fought at one of the sieges of, I think it was like Hydra Cortex or something like that, and she's captured by an Iron Warrior, and she's like his slave, and eventually she kills him, takes his armor, and becomes a Space Marine. That's another Chaos Space Marine who's a woman. There's another Chaos Space Marine that's introduced in the Fabius Bile books. She literally is wearing Chaos Space Marine armor. She literally leads an Emperor's Children's War Band. She literally is a female Chaos Space Marine. And it's just silly that the MacGuffin of this entire conversation has been female Space Marines will happen. I get it. The lore has always been boys. The lore has been guys, men. I get it. The MacGuffin's there. And I guess what I'm discussing right here at this point is that a lot of these fans, a lot of these influencers, a lot of these videos, a lot of these comments have just been saying, oh, Custodes being female is a roadway towards female Space Marines. And I just want to say, I personally don't care. I don't care if there are female Space Marines. It doesn't matter. I mean, the arguments right now are basically that having female custodians will lead to this dark future that all of these dudes and guys hate. And I honestly don't care. It's just, end of the day, the lore does work for the Custodes. You can be a female custodian. There's no gene seed. And I get that it would be a huge retcon, but again, I don't care if there's female Space Marines. Because 40k is the great equalizer, where you're basically you're the same cut of meat towards war, you know?
It doesn't matter what your race, gender, ethnicity, what language you speak. You're basically gonna die a very gruesome and horrible death in Warhammer 40k. And there's that grim darkness that has kind of equalizes everybody. And I get it. There's a lot of female factions already. Sisters of Silence, Sisters of Battle, and there's even women in the Imperial Guard or the Austrian Militarum. There's female Inquisitors. There's already female representation in Warhammer 40k. And I feel like this idea, this concept is, but we draw the line at Space Marines. Only men can be Space Marines. Is ridiculous. It doesn't fucking matter. It really doesn't. Because there's already so many female characters already out there. Why is there such a line drawn where only males can be Space Marines? And I say this because I already pointed out earlier. There have been lore confirmations of female Space Marines. It's already been done. Now, there's lots of authors who have given other stories, and I'm sure they've brought it up. They're like, hey, can I introduce a female Space Marine? And Games Workshop has said, no, you cannot. Unless, it's explicitly stated by us. And that's the thing, is that I get this. There's a corporo mindset of, if we do introduce female Space Marines, they will cause a lot of fans being butthurt over a retcon like this size. And I just gotta say, just get over it. Move on. Like, it's not a big deal, really. And obviously, I feel like we're really trying to look at this in a sense where we're overblowing this, really. And at the end of the day, I think Games Workshop will figure something out. I personally foresee them actually confirming female Space Marines, and they're already making big steps already. The Primus Marines, for example, I'm sure there's going to be a way they're going to introduce female Space Marines in my lifetime anyway, because they're expanding the lore, they're adding new stories, and I think it will give us a new direction. And I just want to highlight the fact that, a lot of these guys, their views are pretty misogynist in way by being exclusive. Like, I just want to call that out. Because at the end of the day, by gatekeeping, by saying, hey, if you're a real fan, make sure you make your voice heard. No female Space Marines. That is absolutely toxic. That is the definition of misogyny. You're excluding people out because of this. And honestly, a lot of Warhammer 40k lore, a lot of your armies and factions, they're homebrew. You could just basically say, oh yeah, my chapter recruits only females. Or my chapter has discovered a way to synthesize the gene seed so that both men or boys and girls receive the gene seed. And I just think it's kind of funny and ironic that everyone's going to lose their mind over a future dystopian sci-fi. And this sci-fi, it's the future, man. Like, you can figure it out wherever you want. There's literally so much futurism in Warhammer 40k. There's teleportation. There's literally massive weapons that uses solar energy to explode and destroy stars, and using volcano guns, volcano cannons. Like, there's so much to unpack from this 3,000, 30,000 years in the future here. And it could be done. It could just snap of a finger. It doesn't matter. Literally, the science is there. It doesn't matter. And again, I have to keep drawing this out. There's literally no difference between female and male Custodes. And I get we're talking about female Space Marines in this part, but I have to highlight this, and this is a Custodes video. There's no difference. A female Custodian and a male Custodian are the same thing.
And the higher-ups shut her down. Honestly, would have been probably better to get rid of her to ensure no damage is done in the future, but it's better than nothing. In Warhammer's case, this Andy guy is the same thing. He is a direct connection between Games Workshop and the fans. And clearly based on his blog spree, he doesn't agree with the OG Warhammer fans when it comes to no female custodians. Which can only mean Andy Talbot is silencing hundreds, if not thousands of voices within a community older than he is in order to quell the fires and ensure the dialogue surrounding this doesn't sour more. But of course, what he's done has made the opposite happen instead, as many users are now taking to social media to confirm that they are done with Warhammer.
painting minis and reading lore and also playing that they didn't know the lore. It is so disrespectful to just straight up lie, and they are getting called the heck out. Nobody seems to be happy with this. It is, of course, never good to lie to your consumers because we're always gonna call you out.
I've seen some pretty cringe comments, and you know, it's a corporation, man. They really don't have to listen to you. And I'm gonna be real with you, I've seen a lot of cringe comments in my own YouTube channel in the past few days that makes me want to like scream, because it's such a cesspool of hate. It's a cesspool of misogyny. It's a cesspool of entitlement. Like, I feel it's different when you're on the internet. Like, I could talk to people and get their opinion and be like, hey man, like, cool. But like on the internet, when people are just spewing out hate and spewing out very condescending, patronizing things, a part of me does want to like block them and mute people. And I'm not saying like that's right or wrong, but like you gotta respect someone who doesn't want to listen to your stuff that they don't want to listen to. And end of the day, we can agree to disagree, sure, but like sometimes I've seen some really nasty comments, and I've seen some stuff that just makes you want to scream because it's just not okay. And yeah, freedom of speech, absolutely, I get it, but I also have the freedom to not have to listen either, you know. And at the end of the day, that's something that I could choose too, because I don't have to sit here and be like, yeah, no, maybe I'll like, you know, give you a chance, an opportunity, but nah, I'm good. You don't have to comment. You know, I don't want to see your comments if you're just gonna be spewing like, you know, right-wing propaganda all day in my face. Like, nah. And again, I just have to highlight this. Like, a lot of the comments are pretty nasty. They're pretty condescending. They're pretty patronizing. They're sexist. And it's pretty, like, you're asking people to sit there and look at this all day. No. No one gets paid enough to look at these comments. And no one, especially in their free time, like me, should be, like, forced to look at your comments either. I don't have to. I don't owe you anything. I'm sorry. Bye. You know, like, thanks. So that's all I gotta say about Games Workshop, like, blocking or silencing people. It doesn't matter at the end of the day. Sorry.
Than as close as they have ever come. And if the project with Henry Cavill actually finally gets off the ground, which is still allegedly in the final phases, then something might finally be produced that will actually break through that mainstream barrier.
Everyone just keeps talking about Henry Cavill. Henry Cavill, yes. He's making a Warhammer 40k show, yes. His favorite faction, he said publicly, has been the Custodes. No. Everyone's opinions of what he thinks is wrong. I don't think he's said anything that I've looked into and said. And I feel like I didn't want to go over the Henry Cavill stuff, but I just saw this multiple times, and at this point I'm just tired of it. Yes, he's making a Warhammer 40k show for Amazon. Yes, he's going to probably make Warhammer 40k mainstream because he's one of the biggest stars in the world. And I think he is an amazing person. I think he'd probably be open with Custodes being female if he publicly says it, but he just probably doesn't want to. And I think he is a nerd, and that's cool. That's literally it. I feel like everyone like shoehorning and raising him on the platform is cool, and it's silly at the same time, because who fucking cares? I think that at the end of the day, Henry Cavill can be a Warhammer 40k fan and not have a strong opinion on things. I don't think we should uplift him like he is God. And literally one of his movies for Superman is like, we're glorifying Superman. And I feel like a lot of folks, a lot of fans are glorifying Henry Cavill in this way, and they're valuing his opinion way too much. And I just have to, that's it. I mean, again, I think he's cool. I like his movies. He was pretty cool in Mission Impossible. I'm excited for the Warhammer TV show, and I thought he was a great Witcher. So, yeah, Henry Cavill, everybody.
Bad Times kind of comes, you know, hot off the heels of BlackRock and Vanguard being primary investors. Got a controlled share of about 10%, which is quite a lot, really. And we know that they love all of this stuff, so it's not really a surprise. But yeah, interesting things. You may have seen this reported before. This particular article is on That Park Place. I'll leave a link down below. But basically, there's now female space marines. Okay, interesting. fine, I guess. I mean, it's just dumb. It's just a dumb retcon. There are other things in the Warhammer universe that, you know, if women want to play it and they want to see themselves represented, they can. It does seem to be an awfully stupid thing, and we know that it's purely an ideological thing. It's not at the behest of actual profit. It's purely ideological, and it's just a shame, really, because it sort of nullifies creativity.
About the law. This isn't even about representation or any of the supposedly positive things they claim it is about. It is simply about raw political power. It is about bending a company and what has in essence now become a British institution to their will. Bearing in mind, GW right now is probably the closest thing that England has to a Disney of their own, to a major entertainment corporation, particularly considering the potential budding cooperation with Amazon. It is fertile ground indeed for ideological capture, which of course has always been the stated, the explicitly explained goal of the wokest movement. So, let me borrow a phrase from the opposition here. Do not let this dishearten you. Let this radicalize you.
Or just any way you want to say the composition.
So he's saying you have to force these behaviors. Whatever you have to do, no matter what, you have to force behaviors because that's the only way that you're going to succeed in keeping up with the current trends. They think that DEI is the future. The CEO of BlackRock, these people who have 10 trillion in assets that are digging their tentacles into literally everything that exists, so that this huge message of diversity, equity, and inclusion, which is apparently a push to prop up one demographic while tearing down another, this is exactly what they're trying to do. And this is why we're seeing this sort of thing in such a big IP like Warhammer 40k. I mean, you've seen it yourself. They have huge ownership in this company. That Park Place reported on it, Grums has reported on it, says we're all familiar with how BlackRock and Vanguard promote their own political agendas by pulling the money strings. What you may not know is that Bailey Gifford, the largest shareholder in Games Workshop, is the European equivalent of BlackRock in that their motive is the same as BlackRock, to drive change their change.
And you can see it here, Vanguard, BlackRock, over 10% share of the company. So it makes sense. It makes sense.
You lay down your hands and get on your knees and accept eternal oblivion for your crimes of being who you are. This is insane. They are attempting to crush your individuality until you are nothing but another NPC in the crowd that they can monetize and control to fit their twisted ideals. This didn't start with Warhammer, nor will it end with it either, but it is a concentrated effort of the many companies that control these IPs that are confident that they will silence you in due time, control you, or reject you completely if you do not abide to their rules. Thankfully, the damage is in full swing right now. If you go look at Games Workshop's shares, they have been in free fall since this has all happened, with many users canceling subscriptions and investors likely pissing themselves because they don't want to lose money. But the investors who are concerned are likely going to be ignored, and if they do sell their shares in Games Workshop, that will be seen as a win in their eyes, because they essentially were successful in replacing even the investors who have wrongthink with potential new investors who might have rightthink instead. But one user named Laz on Twitter pointed out something weird where they said, Games Workshop is literally hiding their current stock value. Was it such a gargantuan hit in the past 48 hours that you want to hide the truth rather than admit that you made a mistake? And yes, on certain stock sites, you can't see Games Workshop stock value in real time. Some might say it's a glitch, but isn't it suspicious that critical information is suddenly not available during a period of time where it is likely being sought after?
Of an outside source, because if we look at their substantial shareholders list, investment firms BlackRock and Vanguard are part of that list, and the two combined control over 17% of the company's shares. So it definitely seems like there was outside interference here. Of course, that will never be confirmed, but
I guess that's what needs to happen. Actual Warhammer fans are going to have to hoard all the real information in text, even if it means stealing it and keeping it untouched. Because we all know Games Workshop will get their people to go back and retroactively update and change previous text in order to rewrite history to fit their new age agenda. And by the way, when we look at who's some of the shareholders in 40k, it all starts to make more sense. Because right there, you can see BlackRock and Vanguard as always. Good lord, man, it never ends, does it?
Like, if you want to cater to this level of toxicity, and if this is your new audience that you prefer on top of the majority, then fine, you know, you can keep that audience, but the majority is not going to stick around. Personally, I do not know how much is going to influence the sales of the company, nor do I know if they care about the sales, because, again, the shareholders, BlackRock and Vanguard, are very ideologically driven lately.
Yeah, so we gotta talk about this. Every video I watch, every comment, a lot of this stuff is talking about BlackRock, Vanguard, and GW's finances. And I think, when I think of BlackRock, I think of the Orcish clan, the BlackRock clan from Warcraft, another fantasy universe. Famous BlackRock orcs is Orgrim Doomhammer, and I had to kind of look into this real quick, and obviously some of these bits and arguments here is that the BlackRock company, which has a lot of shares in Games Workshop, and Vanguard, another company who owns shares in Games Workshop, they have a woke agenda, a left-wing agenda to get more representation, inclusivity, and all this stuff, and it's all coming from the investors, from the guys on top. They're telling Games Workshop what to do, and I think that's insane. This is tinfoil like hat shit right here, where people are just talking out their ass and just trying to pick out random arguments just to see if it sticks on the wall. And I think it's stupid. I think it's dumb. I think these people don't understand how it works, really, and they're just trying to make it up. And I'm not going to pretend I understand it either. I just think they're wrong, and that they're just trying to label something where the corporations are beholden to the investors, and the investors are actively saying, hey, you need to make female custodies, and if you don't, you're not going to get money. Like, it's just silly. I think a lot of these arguments are dumb. And the fact that it's a stretch. Again, this is tinfoil hat stuff. And I feel like we see this a lot in the media where we're just going to look at, you know, the stocks, the investments, and follow the money, man. You got to follow the money. This isn't that simple. And I feel like if you're trying to follow this kind of logic, you're just going to sit there and be like, well, it doesn't make sense. And that's what I'm doing right now. I'm sitting here and I'm like, it really doesn't make sense that you're incorporating these investors into lore changes. And I'm sure these companies, they're investing in bigger and larger things than Games Workshop. They don't care about Warhammer 40k lore. That's enough to be like, if you don't make work agenda items in our, you know, in our investments, then we want our money back. Like, I just don't see that. And I hate to say it, it just giving this actual credence, giving this a response makes me feel silly in itself, because I honestly don't care who owns Games Workshop. I don't care who is financing their finances, who their stakeholders are. I care about the lore. I care about the hobby. I care about the miniatures. I care about the characters. I don't care about stocks. I don't care about shareholders. I don't care about investors. I don't care about this. It's so ridiculous that this is an argument that I have to address in this video, because I literally don't care. I don't care. And I want you to know that you talking about BlackRock clan, BlackRock investors, I don't care. I just don't. And it's silly that we have to address this, because in the day, it just doesn't matter with the idea of having female custodies. And I feel like you just have to acknowledge that they're a company, they make money, and that's it. Like, whoop-de-doo. So, yeah, that's it on my front here. I think we've finally reached the conclusion of this video. This video is the longest video I've ever made. I would have not made this video if not for, honestly, the negative feedback I've been getting. And there is some concern for me for the future of the Warhammer 40k universe and for the lore, but it isn't because of Games Workshop. It's because of influencers, some of the fans, some of the controversy. And at the end of the day, I gotta be honest when I say this. Because people don't like this because in their eyes, it will open more doors for representation in the 40k universe. And I mentioned this again in my first video, but I welcome more diversity. I welcome women, I welcome people of color, I welcome other characters, people, you know, like I welcome other folks in this community, and I feel like, you know, for the fans who hate change, I got bad news for you. Literally, one of the 4 Chaos Gods is Chizek, and he's the Chaos God of change, and change is gonna keep coming, and we're gonna keep seeing probably more representation, more different stories that you wouldn't expect. It's not just going to be white dudes saving the galaxy. It's going to be a lot of shades of people saving the galaxy, or honestly destroying the galaxy and failing to save the galaxy because, you know, end of the day, it's grimdark and it doesn't matter who you are. And I feel like Warhammer 40k has been the great equalizer in a lot of lore, where we've gone from, you know, the lore changing constantly. And I want to emphasize that the fandom, that the community, the lore, it has grown and has changed over the decades and will continue to grow and change. And obviously, I emphasize this a lot. You know, the lore is not concrete. It is hundreds of authors from all ages and backgrounds, from all over the world, making lore changes to Warhammer 40k. And at the end of the day, the Custodes lore is one bit of many, many things. And I know there was controversy like 2 years ago when they introduced the Rogel Dorn tank, and people lost their minds because they're like, where has this tank been for the past 40 years when it's been always there? It's like, listen, it's not that groundbreaking. It's not breaking the lore. It's just introducing more stuff and more models and more kits. And I feel like that's the thing that we have to recognize is a lot of the lore changes has been constantly happening. Warhammer 40k in the 1980s has been different from the 2010s, the 2000s, and now the 2020s. And I feel like I want to emphasize that. Is that the lore is always going to be changing. You know, we've been moving the timeline, you know? Like, I feel like there's been so much change and so much lore updates in the past 3 years alone that basically covers way more of the universe. And having female Custodes is, again, it's going to only improve it. It brings more perspectives, more stories, and more interesting lore, really. And I think at the end of the day, a lot of these arguments, a lot of folks who've been upset about this have really no grounds to be upset about this. The people saying that they're leaving the hobby, they're not going to buy stuff, they're going to 3D print all the models, I think they're being silly. They're being too impulsive and honestly immature. And at the end of the day, I don't really care if they leave the hobby. And I don't want people who have really right-wing views to be in the hobby, because a lot of Warhammer 40k, it is political, it is satire, it is a lot of what the far dystopian future could look like. And some folks, I feel like they don't understand what satire is, and they literally take this for not for granted, but like acknowledging that this is what I want the world to look like. And I'll be honest when I say this, the Imperium of Man is the worst dystopian future out there. It is literally a fascist police state. It is something that I definitely don't want to be under. And being part of a fascist police state isn't a good thing. And I feel like a lot of authors, a lot of people who write these stories and write the stories that I enjoy and look at, it's people living in hard times, making hard decisions. And also making, you know, fantasy at the end of the day. And it's kind of funny when people do take the fantasy into the culture wars. And I feel like that, at the end of the day, that is the conversation we are having right now. And it's funny because, like, these 10-foot giant transhumans warriors are having controversies if they can be male or female. And at the end of the day, like, the science fiction's there, you know? Like, you can have anything, really, if you want to write it. And sure, that's going to piss off a lot of folks, but it doesn't matter for a lot of folks either. I'm sure a majority of the fans don't really care about this. And I feel like as we're going to release date for the Custodes new edition, people are going to complain about how nerfed they've become. And I think that's pretty reasonable. the Custodes looks like, according to the leaks, have been nerfed. And that's fair game. But, again, this video isn't about the nerfs. It's about the female Custodes and the controversy that's been happening. And I feel at the end of the day, I'm proud of made this video. I'm proud of collected a lot of clips of people losing their mind. I'm proud of the screenshots I've captured, just calling out those people who are really wrong. And at the end of the day, I want to appreciate the people who helped me make this video. So my friends, I really want to say thank you so much again for motivating me, and for the folks who gave positive comments and who supported me. I want to say thank you so much, because this is something I care about. This is a fandom that I've been involved in and been a part of since I was a kid. And I'm glad that there's other people out there who have my views, who want to be inclusive, and to have a more better representation of Warhammer 40k. And, I gotta give a shout out to my friends again, because they really, really helped me along this path. And, AMC, thank you so much, man. I want to say thank you so much. You really inspired me. You helped me edit this video. You made me a lot of good ideas, and I feel like I gotta give you a huge shout out, man. So AMC, thank you so much again. You are a good friend. I really appreciate the things you've done to make this happen. And, thank you. For the rest of everyone else, I'm sure this is going to cause a lot of controversy, and a lot of folks are going to disagree. Let me know! Like the comment, like this video, dislike this video, give me your opinions, give me your hot takes. Maybe I'll make a third video. I think this might be one of the few videos I make in a while, especially this length, because it's been a very, very long video. It's taken a lot of hours, a lot of editing, and a lot of researching, and a lot of going through a lot of stuff. So, it's your boy, Kenny Boulder. If you like this, comment, subscribe, whatever. I appreciate y'all. Have a good night, everyone. Take care, and I'll see you next time. Ciao.